And we are live with today's pre-show of our N10-009, our Network Plus study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We got about 10 minutes before we get started, according to the big clock on the desk. We are working on getting everything going here. Now, it seems when I go live that everything is in its place, that everything is exactly as it should be. The things you don't see prior to going live is sometimes it's very chill. Sometimes it's very relaxed. Sometimes we ease right into the study group. Other times there's chaos, there's fire, there's disruption, there's all kinds of things going on. This is one of those days where I feel like I'm like 15 minutes behind on everything I am doing, except for this. We made it. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I know that's not a huge thing. I know it's not, we didn't solve any world problems. I just managed to get here. but sometimes that's very difficult to do. So we're doing okay. We got about 8.5 minutes before we get started. I am checking my last, let's move some things around here so it's 2 degrees straighter than it was before. Networking jobs will be replaced by AI in the future. I can't imagine how that could be the case given what we've seen so far. I am at some point going to see a use case for AI that makes sense. All I really get is a lot of people saying, all of these things are going away because of AI. Oh, really? What's AI going to do? We don't know. We're not sure. We don't have an answer for you. Oh, okay. Well, thanks. Thanks. I also believe that all trees will turn into candy. I think that there would be, the sky will just, instead of being blue, it will always be red. Like there's no reasoning behind the things you're saying. I'll go back. If you go back to the introduction of the iPad, that was a good example. And this happens many, many times in our industry, in that the iPad was introduced. That's it. We're never going to have a desktop computer again. We're never going to have a laptop computer again. Everybody will just have tablets. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. And to be fair, I can't find anything labeled AI that's actually AI. All I see are people doing scripting. Okay, well, we've been doing scripting for a while. We're pretty good on the scripting side. Hello, Malk. Hope things are good in St. Vincent. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So no, I don't have any reason to think that anything's going to change. I think what people are going to figure out is that AI is sort of, or what we are calling AI, is really just sort of the next search engine. That's kind of it. That's all I've seen that can really provide me with anything of true value. I've tried to look into, obviously there are things that really are AI related, that are in large data sets, that are gathering data, evaluating data, understanding the data, and reacting to the data. But at the end, I can't seem to get anyone to show me the intelligence part of it. All I see is a lot of automation. So that's it. As soon as we can start seeing some real problems that are being solved, I'm in. But every time I say, oh, great, show me a problem that it solves, I can't get one. Other than, oh, you could script. Well, I'm doing that now. There's a lot of things that I script that I don't have to do manually. Okay, that's not AI, it's just a script. So, and I think the bad part about any hype like this is that everybody wants to get on that hype train. So they are putting a bunch of things together and calling it AI. I couldn't even get to a point where email was being ridiculous. Google added AI to my email to automatically tell me what was in the message that's clearly on my screen. That does not solve a problem. I was never having a problem with being able to read an email, because ultimately reading a summary of the email is effectively the same thing as actually reading the email and being able to react to it. And the actual email doesn't somehow twist the purpose of the email, which is what all of these AI things tend to do. So you read through an AI thing and then it turns out it's not properly representing what was in the original text, that doesn't help anybody. Why don't you just read the first email? So I ended up changing email clients because of that, because I get a lot of emails in that are one-liners that sounds good. Yes, we can do that. I approve it. And then I end up getting a summary. This email is from Mark, who's letting you know that this is an approved thing. Okay, you just took a 2-word email and you extended it into much more. Again, you're not solving problems for me. And AI is an awful way to generate practice questions for studying. I continue to try them out. Such bad questions, completely wrong, out of scope. It's not even good at that. So again, you're not solving a problem, you're creating problems. I would highly recommend you avoid doing anything AI related when it comes to practice questions. Maybe I can get it to summarize a web page, maybe, but the practice questions have just been horrible, just miserable. So you end up learning the wrong thing. You end up going through questions that have nothing to do with the exam content. It's just not very good at all. So, oh well, that's maybe someday, and that's what I just keep saying. Maybe someday, maybe someday it will work, but so far, not much going on there. So when people say, is it going to take our jobs? Like, oh, not now. If anything, people are not going to be as smart as they used to be because they are relying too much on this complete nonsense. So that's it. Nope, quizzes on video transcripts, also bad. I've tried every combination of trying to make an automated Q&A. They're all bad. They never are consistent. They're incorrect. They're out of scope. They're just not any good. So that's the point for us, point for the humans. We won that one. I think that works well. So that is where I focus. Again, if you're studying using AI, you're studying using the wrong things. You're studying using content that is inaccurate, incorrect. It's not a very good way to do it. Is half the stuff okay? Yeah, half of it. So you'll get a 50 on your exam. How does that work out? It doesn't work out well at all. So there's your challenge, is someday maybe we will get there. Are we there today? We're not even close. We're not even remotely in the same realm of what they are doing. And I get so many emails. We could use AI to make your company more efficient. That you didn't tell me what you're doing. So there you go. So please don't do it. In fact, please don't take my content and stick it into AI. They don't deserve my content. They really need to do it themselves. But it turns out that's not what it does. So there you go. That's what it works like. I have a lot of good questions for you today. I like the Network Plus questions I got for you today. Of course, we do all new questions every month. I'll also let you know that you can submit questions for the after show. That's our second hour. If you have questions for me, you can submit them at any time. I guess I should put up the URL so you can put your virtual pin in our AI pin cushion. It's an AI front. No, it's not. It's just a picture. It's just an image. That's how it works. Our first hour will be I'm asking you questions. The second hour is you asking me questions. That is those 2 hours is the duration of the study group. There you go. We get started in about a minute. How exciting. How exciting. We're getting there. We're making it happen. So a lot of you are checking in. We got lots of folks checking in. I see folks are in North America. There's some Canadians up there. Are you in Edmonton? Looks like somewhere up there. We've got folks in the UK. Looks like way up in the Orkneys for some reason. We've got folks down there. Must be Malk down there in the Caribbean. We've got a lot going on to break out what we happen to be doing here. So let's see how we can go through and break out questions that we have. Is it London? That doesn't seem, that's way up there. That's not where that is. That's the folks in Scotland would like to talk to you. We've got, but you must be in London. So thank you for being here, Angry Dad. Angry Dad Tech. I sound like Angry Dad today. I'm not that angry at all. I'm pretty happy. Things are going, oh, look, it's 12 noon. Speaking of being happy, it's time to start a study group, everybody. Let's go to our keynote. Let's look for a green light. We got it. Oh, I love it. Very nice. It's super bright. Let's bring it down just a little bit. That clock that I put up sometimes adds a lot of brightness to the screen. And with that, with me getting my act together, let's not overqualify that. It's time to start a study group, everybody. Why don't we do that? We'll get this up and running, and here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2026 Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. I almost forgot the number during the introduction. Hopefully that does not continue through the rest of the study group. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This is our monthly study group where I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And if you are here live, you can lock in your answer along with everyone else who has joined us live. Thank you, of course, everyone who is here live. And if you are watching this on the replay, don't worry. You can also follow along on the replay. Everything is set up so that you can learn about these topics and follow along with all of us as we are learning it with you. We have so much to go through today. Let me first remind you that our study group, if you are here live, you'll be able to participate interactively. We would love for you to lock in your answers by using the link on your screen. So pop open a new browser window and head over to this link, which is professormesser.com/QA. That is the link that we will have available for you to answer questions that we have available for you. And in fact, I have a question for you that is available on the screen. This question asks, and we refer to this, by the way, as our rewind question, because this is the only question you're going to get that comes from a previous study group. All the other questions today are brand new. But I like to do a rewind question to make sure that you're able to get in, you're able to answer these questions online. The interactive part of it is working properly. The one rule, that, of course, that we have for those of you that have joined us before, you are very aware of this. Please don't answer questions in the chat room. Please don't put any hints on the chat room screen. Instead, you'll want to follow the links that are on your screen, specifically the one for professormesser.com/QA. The question I have for you today is, a technician is physically connecting to router configuration interfaces on the serial port of their laptop. Which of the following would best describe this connectivity? Is that out-of-band, SSH, jump box, GUI, or API integration? Now, we're going to come back to this question in just a moment, but if you want to answer this, you want to see the question again, you want to follow along, just head over to this URL. You can stay on this page and it will automatically move from question to question. You don't have to keep typing it in. Just stay on that page and answer. We already got a lot of people locking in their answers. We're going to come back to this question in just a moment and find out what the answer really is. In the meantime, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a lot of Network Plus content we're going to cover. So if you're studying for your Network Plus exam or an exam that deals at all with networking, perhaps some of the information today is going to help you. Of course, we are not always here live. You can watch every single video that we've created for the entire Network Plus course, covering every single objective that is listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives, and you can find those videos on YouTube. You don't have to register. They're not behind a paywall. Every minute of every video is available for you. All you need to do is go over to professormesser.com/YouTube, and we have a Network Plus playlist available for you. You can also see these on our website, of course, at professormesser.com. We have an entire index listed there. And of course, we have our weekly pop quiz questions for Network Plus. You can watch those on or view them on Instagram with professormesser.com/Instagram, professormesser.com/X, professormesser.com/Twitter, which I guess will take you to the same place, professormesser.com/LinkedIn. You get the idea. If you're looking for us on social media, professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us, and who knows what you'll find once you get there. We today will be going through questions that are specific to the Network Plus exam. And the current Network Plus exam is the N10-009. This was an exam that was released in June of 2024. Since we know that these exams tend to have a shelf life, if you will, they tend to be live for about 3.5 years, then we expect that this exam will retire somewhere around the fourth calendar quarter of 2027. That means if you are here live as we sit here in March of 2026, you have plenty of time to study for this current version of the Network Plus exam. The exam itself is a single exam. It's 90 minutes in length. You get a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions. I think most people get fewer than 90 questions, but they could give you 90 questions. The score that you're looking for is on a scale from 100 to 900, already a little odd. The score that you're hoping to get for a passing grade is a 720. It's very difficult to calculate this or to somehow figure out the grading method that CompTIA uses, probably intentionally. So all I really recommend is you do the best you can. The number will take care of itself at the end of the exam. It always does. The exam itself consists of multiple choice questions and performance-based questions. We will do both types of those questions today to see how you do in both of those scenarios. We'll talk a little bit more about performance-based questions in just a bit. Also let you know, we have our entire Network Plus course available on our website. We also have course notes. We have downloadable videos. We have audio. We have a lot more on our site to choose from. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Also let you know that this video will be available for replay immediately when we're done. When I hit the stop button, it is automatically added to our Network Plus study group playlist on YouTube. About a day later, we'll have more information for you. I also will create a podcast, an audio-only podcast version of this. So if you have a podcast listening program, you like to listen in the car, you like to listen when you're working out, you can add this to your favorite podcast listening app by going to professormesser.com/podcast. We are also on a number of popular streaming services. So if you're on Spotify, for example, just search for Professor Messer. The podcast will already be there. You don't even have to download anything. So, but if you'd like to join or add our A+ Network Plus or Security Plus study groups, they're over at professormesser.com/podcast. If you look at the YouTube video description of this video, about a day after we're done, you'll notice that it will be populated by a number of timestamps. Those timestamps are put there thanks to my marketing manager, Lori, who is, of course, listening to this replay. So in the future, Lori, this is future Lori I'm waving to. Thanks for doing this, Lori. And thank you, everybody in the chat room. If this is also a feature you like of these videos, please give Lori a heart in the YouTube or in the YouTube chat so that she knows this is something you appreciate as well. Hopefully this helps you find the information you're looking for that much faster. You can go through all of our study groups and immediately find this indexed to the second, thanks to the hard work that Lori is doing. Thanks, Lori. And everybody, check in about a day and you'll see this in the YouTube video description. When we're not doing any of these live streams, you'll probably catch us over on Discord. We have such a great community on our Discord. There's thousands of people that are on our Discord that are studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and other certifications. This is also a great place to talk tech and to just hang out. We have people that have all kinds of interesting conversations going on, and it really is a great community to help study together. There are also a lot of people that already have their certifications that like to chime in. So if you're looking for some knowledgeable feedback, that's a great place to go. professormesser.com/discord. Eventually, you will need to take your Network Plus exam, and there is a cost associated with doing that. You could go out to the CompTIA website and pay full price to take your exam, or you could head over to professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you are in the US, Canada, or a US territory, you'll be able to get these vouchers. The exact same vouchers you would have gotten on the CompTIA website are on my site, but they're less expensive. They're discounted already. Being a CompTIA Platinum partner allows us to provide you with some deep discounts on these vouchers. We want to make sure that you are able to take these exams, and if you're able to take them and get spend a little bit less money, I think that helps everybody. Not only are you getting a voucher that is less expensive than the CompTIA website, I even give you a little bit more. In fact, it's something you can't get anywhere else. Everyone who buys a voucher gets a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook we do not sell. You can only get this ebook if you purchase a voucher or you purchase one of our success bundles. This voucher is available for any of the CompTIA exams. This might be something that can help you, and anytime we can help the pocketbook, I think that's always a good idea. Check those out at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which is: a technician is physically connecting to a router configuration interface from the serial port on their laptop. Which of the following would best describe this connectivity? Is this out-of-band, SSH, jump box, GUI, or API integration? Let's see what you chose. I'm going to close our poll and see what you came up with. 62% of you say the answer is out of band. Look, it's a band. 16% of you say it's jump box. 10% of you say GUI. We've got 7% for SSH and only 5% for API integration. Well, of course, it's 62% out of band. If you're someone who has managed a switch, you've configured a router, you've worked on a firewall, you've probably seen these interfaces on the devices connecting to the actual Ethernet network connection over this 10-100 or 1000 gigabit type connection. This Ethernet link is available so that you can connect to this through the network. We refer to that as an in-band connection because you're using the existing network that is already available to also process all of the other communication on your network. What if your network goes down? What if the connection to this switch is somehow disrupted? How would you be able to manage this switch? Well, fortunately, these infrastructure devices that we use also have a second interface called a console interface, a terminal interface, a serial interface. You may see them labeled differently, but this is a serial connection. This serial connection is connecting via an RJ45 connection. You might also see USB connections or even 9-pin serial connections. They look a little bit like that. So if you see one of those, that is an out-of-band connection, and it is using serial communication to be able to directly connect to that switch. I'll even see, in fact, I've set up on occasion in a data center, I've set up a console connection to multiple devices. So to switches, routers, firewalls, load balancers, and other devices, I bring them all back to a central serial server that allows me to connect to the serial box, if you want to call it that, through an internet, a dial-up, or some other non-network out-of-band connection. And then from there, I can hop to any of the serial interfaces on the entire rack, which makes it so easy. That is a very good way to ensure that you always have connectivity to these devices. And since most of these devices are very important infrastructure devices, you need some way to manage them if you happen to lose internet or network connectivity. So out-of-band connectivity, very important. SSH is something we're very familiar with, but that's an in-band connection, and it does not use a serial port. It commonly uses an Ethernet interface for that. A jump box describes a device that is giving you in-band connectivity to multiple devices. You commonly VPN into a jump box, and from the jump box, you connect in band. Very similar to the serial device that I was referring to earlier that connected with a serial connection. GUI describes a graphical user interface that really doesn't have anything to do with the router configuration and connecting to a serial port. And API integration, usually an important thing to have, especially if you need to remotely automate or manage these devices. But API integration is not commonly done from a serial port either. The answer here, the one that is very obvious, at least for 62% of us, was the out-of-band connection. That's okay. If you didn't get this question right, now you'll get it right the next time you see it on an exam, or if you're not familiar with any of these different options that are on the screen, make sure you're familiar with those because you could be asked about those technologies on your Network Plus exam as well. So there's our rewind question. This is a multiple choice question. This is the bulk of your exam will be multiple choice questions. It consists of a question and multiple options to choose from. So even if you didn't know what the answer was, you could have guessed, and you should on your exam. If you don't know the answer, please take a guess. You don't get any points if you don't answer, and you definitely could luck into the right answer. In this case, you had a 20% chance of getting it right, even in that scenario. So this is something that's an important thing to consider. But CompTIA knows that guessing can sometimes give you those free points, and they don't want to give you all free points. They want to make it a little more difficult for you. So CompTIA has created something called performance-based questions. Performance-based questions are questions that are really anything but multiple choice. That means it could be an infinite number of ways to ask a question, because think of all of the different ways that you could bundle a question together. It could be drag and drop. You could have it reference an image and give you information about it. There could be putting things into a particular order. You might be put at a command line and asked to perform a function. There's all kinds of different ways to ask this that would not be a multiple choice. So it's difficult to duplicate the things you would see on an exam with a performance-based question. But as I like to say, as long as you know the official CompTIA exam objectives, you know everything that is listed in that document, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question, you'll be able to give the correct answer. So today I have a networking question specifically around ACLs, around being able to understand firewall rules specifically. This is a question where I have provided you on the screen a firewall rule base. This is a rule base that is being used by a service provider, and it mostly is, I don't want to give away too much of this, but most of this rule base is regarding incoming traffic, but not the entire set of rules has anything to do with incoming traffic. And what I presented to you are 5 different types of traffic, and I want you to tell me, would that traffic be allowed or would that traffic be denied? Now, for those of you that are listening on the podcast side, the audio only side, you can't see this firewall rule base. It consists on the screen of 7 different rules, and I want you to be able to take each one of these and be able to determine how would this work on this network. Also keep in mind that like most good firewalls and most of the firewalls you're going to find, this particular firewall operates in a rule that has an implied deny at the end. All good firewalls work this way because if there's not a specific rule that matches this, you're going to deny the traffic. That makes it very, very, very secure because you know if it's not in the rule base, it's not getting in. So keep that in mind also as you are answering these. Here are the 5 different traffic dispositions I have for you. They are receive syslog data from an internet log consolidation service. Can't see the word service there because my head's in the way, but know that we are receiving syslog data from an internet log consolidation service. Would that traffic be allowed or would that traffic be denied? I want you to tell me in the link that you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. The next one is you want to host email services over HTTPS. If you're hosting those email services, would that incoming traffic be allowed or would it be denied? You want to receive inbound SSH sessions to a local router? Well, would that traffic be allowed or would it be denied? Receiving inbound SSH based on the rule base that we have in front of us. We also have synchronize all internal system clocks to time.apple.com. This is an outgoing rule, but would it be allowed or would it be denied? And lastly, external clients connect to a locally hosted voice over IP service. I think we could probably assume here that we're having some type of voice over IP protocol. I wonder what that would be. You could probably take a guess, but would it be allowed or would it be denied based on the rule base that is in front of you? Being able to understand these ACLs, being able to step through a firewall rule, being able to know things like port numbers, which is another important part of this, are all part of the official CompTIA exam objectives. So this is a really good example where we're taking multiple aspects of that set of official objectives and we're putting them into a single question. You can see how this almost could be multiple choice questions. It could be many multiple choice questions that we could create from this. Think of this as taking all of those multiple choice questions and kind of squeezing them into one consolidated performance-based question. You can lock in your answers by going to professormesser.com/QA. Please don't put any answers in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. I have to remember all the port numbers myself as we are going through this. We'll see how well I can make that happen on my side. If you are looking for those objectives, we have links to these objectives on our website at professormesser.com/objectives. Something that might be helpful for you to be able to know what's on the exam. I get that question a lot. People say, what topics could I expect to see on the exam? Well, you don't have to guess. They're all listed out in that document. So we'll talk more about the objectives document at the end of this first hour. I'll also remind you that if you do think of a question to ask me during this first hour, you can also submit those questions using this same link, professormesser.com/QA. there's a tab at the top of the screen, and you can tab over and submit a question that we'll look through and possibly cover in the second hour today. Let's go through each one of these different traffic types and see which one of these would be allowed and which one of these would be denied. We'll start with the one at the very top, which is to receive syslog data from an internet log consolidation tool. Receiving syslog data can be a challenge. If you're someone who is looking through and trying to understand all of the different things associated with these port numbers, with the different things that you would want to do, then it would be useful to be able to know, looking through all of the rules, are we covering syslog as one of the things that are listed in our rule base? So this is the part where we really do need to focus on a little bit more of port numbers, of protocols, and of ACLs. The way that most firewalls operate is they start with the first rule, and if the first rule matches, it uses that disposition. If that doesn't match, it goes to the second rule, looks through that rule. If that rule matches, it follows that second rule's disposition. If that doesn't match the data, it goes to the third rule, and so on. Now, we know that syslog data, if you were to look at, I've got different things on my screen here, but if you were to look at syslog data, you know that syslog is, well, maybe you don't, but it's important to know the port numbers for syslog. Syslog is 514, 516, 514. I always get my syslog numbers wrong. But looking through our port numbers on this firewall, port 1 is allowing inbound traffic to 22 TCP. Actually, it's denying any traffic to 22 TCP. Rule number 2 is port 389 TCP is allowed. The third rule is port 443 is allowed. Rule 4 is 3389 is denied. And then on port 5, any remote, which means outbound traffic to port 53 is allowed, and port 123 is allowed. And then ICMP is denied. And of course, because we have a rule at the bottom that is an implied deny, like all good firewalls have, we can have that listed here. Now, you'll notice none of the port numbers I listed match the port numbers used by syslog. Therefore, syslog would be denied. If we were receiving syslog data into our firewall, it doesn't match any of the rules. And because it didn't match any of the rules, it hits that implied deny and no longer is able to be processed through the firewall. It is dropped right there outside of the firewall. Let's do another one. Next on our list is we're going to host email services over HTTPS. I use an email service that uses HTTPS. I connect to that service over HTTPS. A lot of you do. So if you're using Fastmail, you're using Gmail, you're using Yahoo Mail, those are all using HTTPS. Well, if we look at our rules, we need to think, okay, what port numbers do HTTPS use? That Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure uses port 443. We do have a rule. Rule number 3 says if there's any inbound traffic from using port 443 as its destination over the TCP protocol, we will allow it. Therefore, that will be allowed traffic through our firewall. See how that works? Really not too difficult when you start breaking it down into its individual pieces. Our next traffic would be to receive inbound SSH sessions to a local router. This is something you probably have done to different devices. You probably popped open a terminal or an SSH client, and you've connected to an SSH device that is on a network. That SSH traffic, of course, is port 22. And if we look at our rule base, we do have a rule that uses port 22. It's the very first rule number that says if we're receiving any inbound traffic using 22, using TCP, we're going to deny it. So if somebody does try to SSH into a local router, that traffic will be rejected. It will be dropped at the firewall. We'll probably log it in our firewall log, and you'll be able to see that information. Next is we want to synchronize all internal system clocks to time.apple.com. This is something that most people will do. They will take all of the systems that are in their network, and they will configure them to automatically use the network time protocol, or NTP, in order to keep things updated. If you're running Windows, for example, you may notice the clock on your Windows system always seems to be correct. And it's doing that because it is checking at, I think it's time.microsoft.com is the default that is in your Windows configuration. You can, of course, change that to anything that you would like. but that is one that keeps it constantly updated, really to very close to 10 milliseconds or so. You get a very good type of granularity when you're doing NTP communication, and that keeps everything on the same time and the same date, which helps you not only with a number of log consolidation challenges. When you're looking at log files from different devices, it would be useful if all their clocks were synchronized, but it also helps for things like doing any type of encryption that is very sensitive to any type of time drift. So for things like Kerberos, for example, have a very specific time frame they're looking for when you're looking at those signed tickets that you get. So synchronizing these clocks is important. Does our firewall allow that type of outbound traffic? We can see in Rule 6, we see that we've got any traffic that is heading outbound using port 123 over UTP, and port 123 is the network time protocol. And in that particular case, it would be allowed. So anything that is trying to synchronize their clock out there on the internet can do that because we're allowing that traffic through our firewall. And our last one on this list is external clients connect to a locally hosted voice over IP service. There are a lot of voice over IP services out there, a lot of different protocols that can be used. The one that is listed, and probably the one that's the most popular that you will find, is the Session Initiation Protocol, SIP, or SIP, as we commonly call it. SIP uses port numbers 5060 and 5061, if I'm remembering these properly. Those are, as you can see, not listed anywhere on our firewall rules. We don't have either of those port numbers available in our firewall rules. Therefore, it's going to be dropped because we have an implied deny. It's really sort of listed right there at the bottom. It would be Rule 8, would be an implied deny that says anything to anything is denied. That's effectively what it is. So anybody who's connecting through an external client is going to find that traffic, they're going to try to come in through voice over IP using a voice over IP client to our firewall. Our firewall does not have a rule to allow it, and therefore all of that traffic will be blocked. So this is an interesting exercise. If you are someone who has worked with firewalls before, this would be relatively trivial. But as you can see, the process of looking through the firewall logs to find the information that you need is relatively straightforward. So hopefully you're familiar with this style of ACL, access control list. And of course, knowing your port numbers is going to help you a lot if you get a question like this on your exam. This is also a good way to make sure you really know those port numbers that you learned early on in the course materials, because it is listed very early in the official exam objectives. Knowing those port numbers does have an actual use. Yes, you are memorizing these things, and there is a reason that you are going through that process of rote memorization, because you can apply that information into a question like this. That's our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's giving you a perspective of some things you could run into on the exam and styles of questions you might potentially see on the exam. And it's given you a feel of how these multiple parts of the exam can be brought together to create a much larger and more intricate question than what you might get in a multiple choice question. You probably get a handful of these right at the beginning of the exam, usually somewhere around 3 to 6 multiple or performance-based questions rather, of those. And then the rest of the exam, which is usually 70 or 70 plus questions, are multiple choice. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not all performance-based questions, thankfully. I have some people that will report back saying, I started the exam, I didn't know we got performance-based questions, and I thought the entire exam would be this. I spent way too much time. So make sure you think about time management, especially as it applies to performance-based questions. Some people like to get them out of the way first. Some people skip over them, do all of their multiple choice questions, and then make sure they leave enough time to come back and look at them. And thankfully, the CompTIA exam allows you to jump back and forth to any question on this exam once you've gone through the entire set. There's your performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's something that has helped you. Now let's do some more multiple choice questions, which could be super useful if you get into the world of troubleshooting this could be a question you would run into, especially on a network. This question asks, a technician has configured port security on a switch. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this configuration? Port security, would this block switched loops? Would it prioritize specific traffic flows? Would it tag outgoing traffic with a specific VLAN value? Would it prevent more than one device on a single interface? Or would it allow specific MAC addresses? If you think you know the answer, you want to use, I guess, the link that I should put on the screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, go to the link, professormesser.com/QA, to answer this question. A technician has configured port security on a switch. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this configuration? Is it to block switch loops, prioritize specific traffic flows, tag outgoing traffic with a specific VLAN value, prevent more than one device on a single interface, or allow specific MAC addresses? Lock in your answer. Let's see how you do. A lot of people locking them in, but it's not going super fast. So I wonder, we're really thinking about this one. There's all of these things on the screen, all of those different options available to you are things you can do and configure on a switch. They're real things, but only one of them applies to the question that I'm asking. So that gives you really a decent example of how very often you can be swayed or pushed in one direction or another because the things you're seeing on the screen are real. They're actual configuration options. This is a very common way that the exams try to make you really think about the information that you're putting in. And let's see how you really think about this one. The question asks, a technician has configured port security on a switch. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this configuration? Is it to block switch loops, prioritize specific traffic flows, tag outgoing traffic with a specific VLAN value, prevent more than one device on a single interface, or allow specific MAC addresses? Let's close our poll and see how we did with this one. 54% of you, a little bit of a majority here, say to allow specific MAC addresses. That's what port security would do for you. We've got 27% that said this would prevent more than one device on a single interface. We've got 10% that say prioritize specific traffic flows. And then we have 5% each that say to tag outgoing traffic with a specific VLAN value or to block switched loops. Well, interestingly enough, port security is all about making sure that we limit who can communicate over a specific interface. And very often, and perhaps the most common implementation of port security, is to prevent more than one device on a single interface. If you're trying to allow or disallow specific MAC addresses through the switch, that is usually done with MAC filtering. And MAC filtering is commonly seen on switches. It's commonly seen on wireless access points, anything that's dealing with traffic at layer 2. Switches certainly deal with traffic at layer 2, but a very specific option that you're turning on that is called port security on many devices. It has different names depending on the manufacturer of switch that you are using. But port security is designed to limit how many devices can communicate through a specific interface. And that could be a specific MAC, or it could be just the first MAC address that connects to that interface. You don't even have to tell it a MAC address. It will just remember the first person on this interface is the only person who can communicate through that interface on the switch. So port security is an incredibly important consideration. There are a lot of different security tools on switches that we can use to help prevent different types of attacks. This is only one of the many. Make sure you are familiar with this. If you'd like to know what those other options are, make sure you check out our video on the Network Plus course. It's the N10-009 in section 4.3. This is covered in the video named Device Security. Port security is a great feature. If you want to be able to make sure that nobody pulls out a connection and plugs in their own device, this is what you would use. It's based on information that is internal to the switch. It's based on looking at MAC addresses, but you don't have to configure it with any MAC address information. You just turn on port security and it starts working automatically. That's all you have to know. Port security is set up usually with a maximum number of MAC addresses on an interface, not a specific MAC, but maybe only one MAC address can communicate through this interface, or maybe two of them, and then that's it. You get to decide as the administrator. It monitors how many different and unique MAC addresses are communicating through that. When you exceed the maximum that's configured, you can have the switch stop forwarding traffic. This is a very useful security tool and something you should be familiar with if you're planning to set up security in a switched environment. So there you go. That's your answer for this one. Prevent more than one device on a single interface is what we were looking for. 27% of you got that one absolutely correct. Let's now shift over to, no, it won't shift. We'll just do another multiple choice question. Next on our list is this question that asks, an installer is running unshielded Category 6 cable for a new 10G-based network installation. What is the maximum supported distance for this specific cable category while using 10G-based T? Again, I'm not giving you a specific category in this. You have to know if I'm running Category 6, well, I guess I'm giving you details enough to tell you it's unshielded Category 6, but it's also important to know the type of signal going over that unshielded Category 6 cable. So would that be 100 meters, 200 meters, 55 meters, 10 meters, or 33 meters? Knowing these distances are the recommended distances that are listed in the IEEE standards for 10G-based T. So it's useful to know what these are and know what they are really in a memorized form so that you can understand when you're looking at a cable tester and that cable tester says this cable is a certain distance, you know exactly the type of signal that you're able to run over that particular distance. We don't make these up. They're not a guess. It's not a something that we are simply guessing at or trying to figure out if it works or doesn't work. These are values that are clearly listed in the IEEE standards. Can you go longer than the IEEE standards? Yes, you could. You could go longer than what the IEEE says is supported. But if you try to get any type of troubleshooting or you run into any problems, the first thing that the switch, router, or Ethernet card manufacturer will tell you is that you're exceeding the standards that we've created this for. That's why we have standards to begin with. So make sure you're familiar with that. Let's see how we did with knowing these standards. An installer is running unshielded Category 6 cable for a new 10G-based T network installation. What is the maximum supported distance for this specific cable category while using 10G-based T? Is it 100 meters, 200 meters, 55 meters, 10 meters, or 33 meters? Let's see what you chose. 52% of you say the answer is 100 meters. 36% of you say the answer is 55 meters. And then immediately goes down to single digits. 6% say 10. We have 4% that said 33 meters and 2% said 200 meters. Having a familiarity with the cable categories can be very, very useful. The cables themselves are constructed with these standard category values so that you know when you buy a Category 6 cable or you buy a Category 7 cable or you buy a Category 5A, 5E cable, you know that the cable that you are purchasing has been constructed to support a certain type of signal to a particular distance that has been documented in the IEEE standards. So you can see I've got a table on the screen that gives you a summary of those. And the IEEE and the TIA group, which really sets the standards for these categories, work together to be able to make that happen. So you really need to refer to those networking standards to be able to know what speeds and distances are supported on a particular category of cable. Very often I see people sort of reversing this, and you can't reverse it. You can't take a Category 6 cable, and I often see questions, really poorly written questions on the internet that say, how fast is a Category 6 cable? It's not, it doesn't have a speed. It's just a cable. It's a bunch of copper. It just sits there. There is not a speed associated with a category of cable. Categories refer to the construction and minimum value specifications that are associated with that cable. What people I think are often asking are, if we were to put 10G-based T on this cable, and it's a Category 6 cable, what is the supported distance? Or what is the supported speed over that particular link? That's really what they are asking, but that's not what they are saying in the question. So if we were to look at our particular set of Ethernet standards we have here, there are a number of different categories of cable that are supported for 10G base T. You can see I have a few of them listed in this table. We have category 6, category 6A, and category 7. If we were to look at the standards for 10G base T and what is supported if you happen to be using category 6, not category 6A, not category 7, not category 5E, but category 6, the IEEE standards say that you're able to run unshielded communication up to 55 meters, and it supports a shielded communication up to 100 meters. In our particular question, we were asking about unshielded category 6 running 10G base T. That means that unshielded, the standard says 55 meters is the maximum that is supported for that particular signal. So if we were to look at the answers that we had, 55 meters is the one we were looking for. So those of you that answered 55 meters, that would be 36% of you, got that one absolutely right. If this was shielded category 6 cable, or it was category 6A, which is augmented, those would be supported over 100 meters. If that was the case, the 52% of you that answered that one would have gotten it correct. Very few copper-based Ethernet standards go beyond 100 meters. So this is one where 200 meters is not one you would commonly see on any answers associated with copper-based Ethernet. So in this case, also not a supported length for 10G base T over category 6. Fortunately, we can get more than 33 meters out of it. We can also get more than 10 meters out of it, so those would not apply either. But if you have a question about different standards, how this relates to the categories, we explain it all and show you how to troubleshoot that in N10-009 section 5.2, and the name of the video is Cable Issues, to be able to understand those. Now, if you want a summary of every single one of those videos, you want to be able to look through some of this information after you've watched the videos, you're in luck, because we have a set of notes that can help you with that. Of course, our Network Plus course is 87 videos in length, and it is over, as you can see, over 12 hours of content. And there's a lot of content in Network Plus. We've already talked about cable types. We talked about port numbers. There is categories of cable, Ethernet standards. There's cloud-based technology, subnetting, topologies, wireless communication, security for all of those. All of this is part of Network Plus. And if you were to look at my course notes, I have a copy of the printed course notes here. This is the physical edition of my course notes. You could, of course, get the book and be able to take this wherever you go, or you could look at our PDF version of this, which is an identical version to the printed version. But of course, you could have it as a PDF and take it with you on all of your mobile devices. It can be on your desktop computer. It has all of the text, all of the important charts, and all the important graphics from my courses. In fact, if you've been through the first few videos, some of these images look very familiar to what you've seen in those. So if you want a list of the port numbers, they're in here. If you want a list of those cable categories, they're in here. If you want to understand more about VPN communication, IPsec, it's in here. So everything that is important that you see in our videos, we put it into our course notes. It makes a great reference tool when you are done with your courses. When you've gone through all of your books, when you do everything associated with it, it's there in the set of course notes. I mentioned we have this physical edition as well, which of course is identical to what you just saw in the digital edition, but this is something that takes time to print and ship to you. So as you're waiting on this to be delivered, if you purchase the physical edition, you get the digital edition at no extra cost. So you can download that digital PDF at any time, immediately after your purchase. You'll be able to reference that while you're waiting on this to arrive in the mail. It's also a great way to support what we're doing here and make sure that we're able to continue making these courses for others. If you'd like to learn more about our course notes for Network Plus, you can find it at professormesser.com/NPCN. That's for Network Plus course notes. And of course, you can also look on our website, the main menu, to find that as well. Let's do another question. Let's step through. This is a question where we're also considering how we are moving traffic between different devices in a data center. The question asks, a security analyst noticed a high volume of traffic moving between an application server and a database server located in the same equipment rack. Which of the following would best categorize this traffic? Is it external traffic, distribution traffic, east-west traffic, in the clear traffic, or core to access traffic? A security analyst notices a high volume of traffic moving between an application server and a database server located in the same equipment rack. Which of the following would best categorize this traffic? Is it external traffic, distribution traffic, east-west traffic, in the clear traffic, or core to access traffic? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer right here at that URL, professormesser.com/QA, and see what you think the right answer would be. This is good to consider, especially when you're a network analyst, you're a security analyst, you're trying to understand traffic flows on your network, which is an important thing to understand because it will help you from a security perspective and from a network optimization perspective. It also helps if you have to do any type of troubleshooting where people say, we need the packet capture. Do you have a packet capture of that communication? Well, you're going to have to plug into the network and grab some packets. Where are you going to do that from? So understanding those traffic flows can be very important to doing a lot of different tasks that you may be faced with when working either in a networking field. You could probably be working in application development. You might need these skills, and certainly from a security perspective. Lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Let's see how you did with this one. A security analyst notices a high volume of traffic moving between an application server and a database server located in the same equipment rack. Which of the following would best categorize this traffic? Is it external traffic, distribution traffic, east-west traffic, in the clear traffic, or core to access traffic? Let's close the poll and see how we did. 65% of you say it's east-west traffic. That would be I-4, I think, easily. 18% of you say it's core to access traffic. 13% say distribution traffic. And then it drops to single digits within the clear traffic and external traffic. 65%. We haven't been too successful with our first guesses in our previous questions, but that ends now because the 64.52% of you that said the answer is east-west traffic, you got it absolutely correct. This is the answer we were looking for. This comes from our N10-009 course, section 1.6 for network architectures, because as I mentioned, it's very useful to know where traffic starts and where traffic ends. Very often, this is really just two devices. There's a start point and an end point to be able to do that. But these traffic flows can be pretty important to consider. If this is traffic within the same data center, we often refer to this as east-west traffic. That is what we're talking about. If this is something that's going outside of our data center, we commonly refer to it as north-south traffic. So here is a very basic configuration, multi-tiered traffic where you have multi-tiered architecture, where you have an internet connection coming in, you've got a core that's here, you've got access switches that are available, and then you've got the end users or servers at the bottom. So anything within the data center would be east-west. If we're having this traffic go outside the data center, it's north-south traffic. So if these are between a web server and a database server on the same network, in the same building, or in this particular case, in the same rack, then this is considered east-west traffic. And those of you that answered east-west traffic, 65% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to give you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Now, if you don't have your certification yet, this won't apply to you. But for those of you that are collecting CEUs for renewal, or you're collecting these CEUs for other purposes, this could be very useful for collecting that extra hour. So this is how you would earn that CEU. You must follow these instructions to receive an email from me. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us form, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put March 2026 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, east-west traffic, distribution traffic. I know there's a lot of traffics there, but it's a super secret code word. It could be anything I would like to be, and that's what's on the screen. So we're going with that for super secret code words. Send that to me about a week or so. I try to get these out to you. It took a little bit longer to get the latest out, but just before our study group today, I sent out all of the CEUs that I had. So now I'm waiting for more to come in. So I'm ready to receive all of your requests that are coming in, and it takes me about a week to make that happen. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower. But for those of you that didn't catch the format, the way that you would do that is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us. In the Contact Us form, put in your name, your email address, and the subject line, please put March 2026 Network Plus or something close to that. I can guess from there. The important part is in the body of that message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, east-west traffic, distribution traffic. Then I know you must have been here to hear all of that. Now you know the code words, and I will receive your email. I'll confirm you got the code words right. I will send you back your digitally signed email that certifies that you were here for 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. Let's now we got time for another question. Maybe even two. So we'll try to squeeze a couple more in here. The next question on our list is this one that says, a technician is connecting two switches where both switches are configured with VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. Which of the following would be the best way to connect these two switches using one physical cable? Would it be virtual private network, 802.1q trunk, access port, loopback connection, or static route? Those are your options available. A technician is connecting two switches where both switches are configured with VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. Which of the following would be the best way to connect these two switches using one physical network cable? Would that be done through a virtual private network, 802.1q trunk, access port, loopback connection, or static route? Do you think you know the answer? Please answer at the link that you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're going to lock in our answer at the link you see, professormesser.com/QA. This might be a useful task. In fact, you might be tasked with doing this if you're ever someone who's working along the lines of plugging in a network connection and designing a network. You use these technologies all the time. An interesting part of this question, of course, is all of the answers are technologies that you could be using during that planning and implementation process. So you have to pick the right technology to be able to get this question right. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a technician is connecting two switches where both switches are configured with VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. I guess they could be configured with other VLANs as well. Which of the following would be the best way to connect both of these switches using one network cable? And that is the secret, of course. Would it be through a virtual private network, and an 802.1q trunk, an access port, a loopback connection, or static route? Let's see how you did on this one. We'll close our poll, and we can see the results show us that 71% of you say it's a .1q trunk, which is how we say it in the world of networking. 11% of you say a static route would handle this. 8% say a loopback connection. 7% say an access port. 4% say a virtual private network. In this case, we have 71% of you that said .1q. Got this one absolutely right. That is the technology that allows us to have a single cable, but support having thousands of VLANs communicating through that single cable. It's a way that you can connect everything up using a single connection instead of having a separate run for every single VLAN that you would be working with. This is the challenge, of course, is that if you have different switches, this is exactly the scenario we're describing in this question, where there are two individual Ethernet switches. Both of the switches are configured with VLAN 100 and VLAN 200 in my picture that I have here. Both of these are set up, but now we'd like to connect those VLANs together so that people on VLAN 100 on this switch can talk to the devices on VLAN 100 on the other switch. After all, they're in the same VLAN, they're in the same IP subnet. It'd because generally we connect and associate a single IP subnet with a single VLAN. Same thing for VLAN 200. It would be nice if we connect those together. Well, obviously, we could just run two different cables. We could run one cable for VLAN 100 and one cable for VLAN 200. That, of course, is taking up two additional interfaces on these switches, on both of the switches. But what if there was 10 VLANs on the switch? We'd have to have 10 cables. What if there was 100 VLAN cables or VLANs on each switch? We would need 100 cables between each switch. As you can see, it doesn't scale very well. Now, fortunately, there is a very useful task that we could do. We can, instead of having individual cables for each individual VLAN, we can create what's known as a trunked connection. This trunk is able to take multiple VLANs. It sticks a special tag on the traffic itself, sends them to the other side, where the other end of the trunk will remove the tag and place that data on the correct VLAN. So this is a very good example of how you could have a single cable but support thousands of VLANs communicating between switches without having to build up thousands of physical connections between those two devices. An incredibly useful technology, one that you will very commonly see in practically any enterprise and even smaller size network configurations. I'm using multiple VLANs just in the studio here. So you may find that there are a lot of different options that are available once you start trunking between these different VLANs. And that's why we refer to this. I even gave you a little hint here, because I could have just said 802.1q, and that would have been enough. .1q describes this process of trunking, which is what we call the integration of that data, the encapsulation of that data within these different VLAN headers. So .1q, when somebody says, oh, is that a .1q connection? They're asking, is that a trunked connection? Saying 802.1q trunks, almost like saying an ATM machine. It's a little bit redundant, but still acceptable. We understand what you're talking about, because I say ATM machine all the time. So I say .1q trunk all the time. So it's the Department of Redundancy department, if you will. Now, what about these other options? We now know that the answer was 802.1q trunk allows us to do this. 11% of you said a static route. Static routes are used to direct where IP-related traffic would be going. In this case, we weren't really even talking about layer 3 or IP-related traffic. We were talking about simply connecting two switches and connecting two VLANs together. We're talking about layer 2 communication. So static routes would not come into play with layer 2 communication. That is specifically for layer 3, and in this particular case, with IP communication. 8% of you said a loopback connection. Loopbacks are a troubleshooting tool that we would commonly use. It's often a physical interface we plug into a port that takes all the traffic coming out of the port and redirects it back into the port. You'd think, why would you need to take traffic coming out and simply send it back, loop it back into the same device? Because the way that this works from a troubleshooting perspective, if we send a certain amount of traffic out that interface, we would expect to see a certain amount of traffic come in through that interface, and it should be identical to what we sent. So it's a nice troubleshooting tool. If we receive different traffic than what we have sent, then we probably have a problem with that interface. I guess technically we could have a problem with the loopback connection as well, but that's one of the troubleshooting tools you would use to be able to verify the integrity of a physical interface by looping back the traffic and seeing what we happen to get when we start sending data out of that interface. Doesn't apply to VLANs though, has nothing to do with VLAN communication or really communication of any kind. If we're using a loopback connection, we're not processing any traffic through that interface. We had to break the connection just to loop back the signal, which makes sense. 7% of you said an access port. That's a bit of a Cisco term, but we see it used with other manufacturers as well. If it's not a trunked connection, then it very often is an access port connection. An access port is effectively a standard switch port. So when you've plugged in your laptop or other devices directly into a switch, and you know that you've now got access to the network, that is your access to the network. Your laptop is now able to access other devices on that network, so we refer to that as an access port. So if you have a Ethernet switch at home, you have an Ethernet router or a firewall at home that you use, and you plug in directly to that device, you may have noticed you have access to all of the things you need on the internet Cisco would call that an access port. An access port, though, does not provide you with a way to consolidate different VLANs together. It will most commonly on the switches you'll probably have it configured as an access port or as a trunked port, and pretty much any Ethernet switch out of the box will have all of the ports configured as access ports by default. And a virtual private network, we've used these before, VPNs. Virtual private networks allow us to connect over an encrypted channel to a VPN concentrator so that anybody who is able to tap into that communication stream would simply see encrypted information and have no idea what we're sending back and forth. It's a very strong security function, something we use all the time. You've probably seen plenty of ads and things on the internet regarding VPNs, but virtual private networking is not the technology that allows us to connect two switches and send multiple VLANs over a single interface. Virtual private networks are able to provide us with encrypted tunnels, which is not the situation that we had in this question. So for this particular scenario, what we were hoping to find would be an 802.1q trunk, and 71% of you got that one absolutely correct. I know we're sort of at the top of the hour. I think we can squeeze in another question, can't we? I think that would be good. So let's see how this one goes. This is kind of a callback a bit. So we're going to see how well you remember things from earlier in the study group. So I was thinking of switching past this question, but no, we're gonna see how well you were listening earlier. Here's the question for you that asks: a network administrator is configuring a firewall to allow time synchronization traffic to reach an internal time server. Which specific port and transport layer protocol should be enabled to support this configuration? So were you paying attention earlier? Let's see if you were. Your possible answers are UDP 123, TCP 1433, UDP 161, UCP 67, I think we could say UDP 67, and TCP 443. So even though it says UCP, just consider that as a UDP because apparently I'm incapable of typing correctly. The question again asks, a network administrator is configuring a firewall to allow time synchronization traffic to reach an internal time server. Which of the following, or which specific port and transport layer protocol should be enabled to support this configuration? Is it UDP 123, TCP 1433, UDP 161, UDP 67, or TCP 443? Lock in your answer. Everybody's locking in quick. We might end strong on this one to be able to make this happen. Wonder if I can change these on the fly. Can I edit them on the fly? I bet I can. Can I do it once you've done this? I bet. Let's find out. We're going to test this and see if I can really change things on the fly without completely disrupting everything that we've been doing here. And indeed you can. There you go. Now it all says the right thing. So I think that works pretty well if we're working through all of these. See how well you do with all of this. This might be a good one to walk through if anybody's working with these. And remember, if you were listening closely, this was a gimme. This is also, by the way, not unusual on the actual exam. Because you're getting 90 or so questions that are posed to you, it's not unusual to see things that were covered in one question showing up on other questions. I often see this. In fact, this was the example today is a very good example of this, is performance-based questions have so much in them. In fact, the performance-based question we did today was a firewall rules and all of these different port numbers and all these different firewall configurations and ACLs and allowing and denying. There's a lot packed into that single question, which performance-based questions tend to be. So as you go through the rest of your exam, you may find topics that you covered in a previous question showing up in future questions. Pretty normal. So I think this is more real world than I really expected to be today. But this is something you can kind of think about as you are going through your actual exam. Let's see how well you did with this one. I have a feeling we did pretty well. I've not looked at the answers yet, but this one asks, a network administrator is configuring a firewall to allow time synchronization traffic to reach an internal time server. Which specific port and transport layer protocol should be enabled to support this configuration? Is it UDP 123, TCP 1433, UDP 161, UDP 67, and TCP 443. Let's close it up, and 79% of you say the answer is UDP 123. Well, we don't have to go any farther. Of course, that's the answer we were looking for. If you remember our performance-based question at the beginning, we went through a lot of different ACLs. One of those ACLs was specific to us performing a time synchronization on an outbound basis, which is a little different than the one that we have here, but pretty close anyway. And it uses port 123. This particular case, it's using UDP to be able to make that happen. That is what we were looking for, and that's why I think we did so well on this one. We remembered that from our previous question. We have other protocols that are in here as well. TCP 443, 10% of you think that HTTPS is what we would be doing, but TCP 443 not commonly used for time synchronization. UDP 67, UDP 161, and TCP 1433 also not used. This would be 67 for DHCP, 161 for SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, and 1433, it's a database, isn't it? Is that Squirrel Server? Is that MySQL? Is that one of those? Did I get it right? This is the problem with doing a live stream where 10 things are going on at the same time. You often have to remember things, but I don't have to because I have the chat room here to help me. They will always tell me if I'm wrong. So, and trust me, they're really good at telling me when we're wrong. That keeps me honest. So it's nice to have the smart people across in my chat telling me and keeping me straight with everything that we are doing with these protocols. Of course, it is network time protocol. It is, I did get it right. It is Squirrel Server. Thank you, chat room. NTP clients and servers, NTP 123 is what we're using there. Kind of an easy one to remember. 123. We're talking about time. And that is one that, regardless of the NTP communication, pretty much every firewall is going to allow that. Time synchronization is so very, very, very important. We need to make sure that we have all of our systems, all of our servers, all of our routers, all of our switches, all of our firewalls, anything that we're plugging into the network needs to have the time synchronized. It will help you so much to be able to have that there. And indeed, that was the answer that we were looking for. UDP traffic over port 123 is indeed the network time protocol. And 79% of you got that one absolutely right. I'm kind of glad we did that one at the end. It was a nice little callback to the things that we were doing earlier with this. I mentioned earlier on in the study group that everything we've talked about today, all of the topics, all of the port numbers, all of the IEEE standards, the cable categories, the security features, everything that we covered is all very specifically listed in the official Network Plus exam objectives. This is an important document. This should be the first thing you download before you start your studies. This should also be the last thing you reference before you book your exam. Let me explain why. Because CompTIA, unlike a lot of other certification exams out there from Cisco, from Microsoft, and from other places, those organizations don't give you a lot of detail. They just tell you, you have to know about cable categories. Okay, what cable categories? We're not going to tell you. We're just going to tell you you need to know about cable categories. Fortunately, CompTIA goes an extra step, and they will tell you very, very, very detailed information about what you can expect to see on the exam. These are the official CompTIA exam objectives for Network Plus. And for example, if you look at domain 1.0, which is networking concepts, there are a number of different subdomains underneath that. Subdomain 1.1 says, explain concepts related to the Open Systems Interconnection, or OSI, reference model. And it tells you about layer 1 physical, layer 2 data link, layer 3 network, layer 4 transport, etc. So you have to know all those layers. Okay, well, if it's that OSI model, I think I could have figured that one out. But when we get to domain 1.2, subdomain 1.2 says, compare and contrast networking appliances, applications, and functions, including physical and virtual appliances that may be a router, a switch, a firewall, IDS, IPS, load balancer, proxy, NAS, SAN, access point, controller, CDN, VPN, QoS, TTL. Now, the important part of this is, even though you look at this and think, wow, that's a lot I need to know, and it is. This would not be a certification exam if there wasn't a lot of things that you would need to know on this exam. But CompTIA limits their scope to the exam to exactly this information. They rarely, if ever, go outside the scope of these topics on the exam. That means if you go through every single page of these exam objectives and you study every single bullet that is listed here, and you use this as your checklist, and you now know all of the topics that they have listed across all of these different pages of the official exam objectives, you're ready to go take the exam and you're ready to crush it. You will easily pass your exam if you know every single one of these bullets. So if you can explain to yourself or to someone else, what is the importance of a proxy? How is it used? What about network attached storage? How is that different than storage area network? What is an access point? And how does a controller fit into this? Those are important things to know. We cover that in all of our videos, of course, because I use this same checklist to make all of my videos. That's why I can tell you that my videos cover every single topic that you need to know for the exam. Now, CompTIA updates these set of exam objectives with each new exam release. So the current exam release is the N10-009. Sometimes they'll put a version number after it, but as long as you know the exam number itself, N10-009, that's the same as what CompTIA is calling the V9 or version 9 of Network Plus. So this is incredibly important to be able to work through this. The important thing that you should also keep in mind as you are going through this is that this ultimate list is one that you have to make sure is updated for that version. So this is why you'll see me recreating every new course that comes out. I have all new videos. I reshoot every single video. I don't redo or reuse any of those previous videos because CompTIA tends to make small tweaks, small changes to these through the years. So when a new exam comes out, I want you to have exactly the information that would be presented to you on the exam. That's why I stick with these as well. Make sure you get your hands on these. The link is on my website at professormesser.com/objectives. The reason I recommend you go to that link is because, let me show you, if we go to that site on the Professor Messer website, one of the things you will notice here is I give you a diagram of what the page looks like. I not only give you a link to the objectives, but when you get to this page, you'll notice at the very top of the page on the CompTIA website, it's kind of hard to tell where to go to download the objectives. So what I tell you is to scroll down in that box till you get to the red part here that says get the objectives and practice questions. You put in your email address and you can download them immediately to be able to have them available. So if you're not finding it on the page, I also mentioned that if you don't see it, that red box, you may need to enable cookies, disable pop-up blockers, or remove other filters because that will certainly filter them out. It's an important document. It will help you with your studies. Oh, and it's free. You just download it. You've got it. You got everything you need. That's where you should go. We do one of these study groups every month. I've already set my dates for April, but sometimes these dates change, as they did this month with our Network Plus, our A Plus. I think Security Plus is probably the same. But if you need to know or when the most updated list is, you go to our calendar, professormesser.com/calendar, and you'll notice in April, we currently have scheduled April the 14th as being our next Network Plus study group. In fact, I think I've changed that date a couple of times just because I try to lock it in, but then something pushes me out of the way and I've got to change it to a different date. So I appreciate your flexibility in allowing me to do that. And I make sure that every time I have to update this time and this date, I put a new entry into the calendar. So if you're looking at that page of professormesser.com/calendar, you are looking at the most recent information regarding that calendar. That is where I go to update it. So, you know, if you're looking at that page, you are also looking at the most updated version of that. Of course, if you're into A+, we have our A+ Core 1 on April 6th. Our A+ Core 2 is currently scheduled for April the 9th. And we even have a Security Plus one next week here in March. So we're not even done with March, but we've also scheduled one for April on April the 22nd. You might want to join us for Security Plus study groups. Those are also a lot of fun. We have Security Plus questions that come directly from the Security Plus exam objectives. So we're through our first hour, but don't worry, we got more in our after show coming up next. So stick around for that, where I will answer your questions. You can use that same link we've been using this whole time, professormesser.com/QA, to ask me anything you'd like to know about certifications, technology, or anything else. Be glad to answer, or at least consider answering the things you're sending in. Don't forget about our Network Plus course success bundle at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We also have our discounted vouchers. If you're in the US, Canada, or US territory, you could save quite a bit of money by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. We also give you instructions. You'll get my free Exam Hacks ebook by purchasing one of those. That's an exclusive for the folks that are getting the vouchers. You can't buy that Exam Hacks ebook. And of course, if you're on the internet, you're on social media, hey, so are we. You can find us by simply typing in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us on, /Discord, /YouTube, /X, /Instagram, /LinkedIn. You get the idea. /Facebook, we're there. You can find us. Just type in professormesser.com/ the name of the place that you would like to find us. And hopefully we're there. If we're not, let me know. And we should be there. We'll make that happen. Well, thank you for joining us in this first hour. We do love doing these study groups. It's always interesting and a lot of fun to do this Q&A. And we're glad that you're able to join us. Stick around for our after show. Stay right there. Coming up in just a few seconds. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay, let's now get my picture back on the screen. I'm sure there's a way to do that, isn't there? Let's make this happen. I guess it would be good if I click the right buttons. There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the after show. This is the part of the study group where I've not planned at all. There's no planning whatsoever because I have no idea what questions will be posed of me or to me. The way that you would pose a question, the way that you can submit a question is at any time you can go out and submit this Q&A. In fact, I should probably change this so that we can see on the screen. If you would like to join us for these questions, you can do this for the second hour of the study group at any time. I'll be moderating these behind the scenes. You just use that same link we were using before, professormesser.com/QA, and I will sift through, I will pour through the questions that you have submitted to see what types of things you would like to know about. And there are a lot of great questions here, some of them around topics associated with Network Plus. Some of them are technology topics. We were talking in the pre-show of today's live stream. We were talking about AI, or I guess the lack of AI that we've ultimately found. Apparently the world is not ending, and we don't have to worry so much about what's going on. That's the latest anyway from the world ending perspective. Let's really dive into the questions that you have and see if we can sort of address some of the questions you have about Network Plus, about IT in general, about getting a job in this industry. And I'll try to bring you my perspective of someone who has been a systems engineer manager and systems engineer in the world of networking, cybersecurity, and other organizations. So maybe I can give you at least some perspective of what we've seen out in the industry. Let's start with the question from Miles, who asks, which objective do you think is the hardest part of the Network Plus exam? Well, there's quite a few objectives to go through, of course. If you're someone who has listed through all of those objectives, I brought those up on the screen earlier with the exam objectives. So I think I should probably provide exam objective information on the screen for you as well. I guess it would be good if I could click some things on my side. And then suddenly my keyboard has decided we don't need to click things. It's not important. You just need to move things around. Okay, now things are working. Let's go through those objectives we had earlier. Let's just bring them up. We can kind of have a look at the different objectives we have here. You notice there's a lot listed here. There are plenty to pour through. I get a lot of questions, of course, from Network Plus about port numbers. I've had people show up with a list of hundreds of port numbers. They went to a class, the class handed out all of these standard port numbers, and they were spending all of their time studying hundreds of port numbers. I would say that would be difficult, but as I mentioned before, CompTIA doesn't go outside the scope of what they put in their exam objectives. These are the only port numbers you need to know. That's it. That's all you need to worry about. If I had probably my most mentioned topic from the exam is right down here. It's in section 1. Now, of course, we've gone through all these pages of all these different objectives, but I'm going to come down to section 1.7. In section 1.7, there is a section under given a scenario, used appropriate IPv4 addressing. And the one that always tends to get people is these two bullets on subnetting. Subnetting is math. Now, fortunately, it's not difficult math. At its very basic level, it's addition and subtraction. Some people make it a little bit more challenging by adding multiplication into the mix. That's where you lose me, quite honestly. I'm pretty good at math. I'm pretty good at breaking out these different things. I'm not great at math, but I'm not awful. I can keep up. And I think this is the section that probably makes people crazy on Network Plus, because it is a large number of things you have to know just in these two bullets. This is where I think if you have any experience in networking, this becomes useful. And if you're planning to do something with networking in your career, you do need to know subnetting. It is an important skill. You will use it often. So knowing those two bullets is going to be pretty important to you. But as you notice on the exam, we went through, here's the first 2 pages of the objectives, lots of bullets there. Here's the next 2 pages, lots of bullets there. 2 of those bullets are the subnetting bullets. The next domain, domain 2, lots of things you need to know there. Domain 3, we got hundreds of topics here, hundreds and hundreds of topics that you need to know for Network Plus. So I think people perhaps need to put that in context, because if you are spending all of your time, you're spending days or even weeks trying to understand subnetting, and we have a number of different subnetting techniques in our video course. You can choose the one that works for you. But if you're spending all of your time on subnetting, you're clearly neglecting a huge part of these objectives. And as I've told people, I think you should ultimately understand subnetting. It's one of those things that is very complex to try to figure out until suddenly it all kind of works together. It's like a puzzle piece. You put that puzzle piece in and, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. There will be a point where you'll hear a ding or bing. There will be angels that will be singing. You'll hear a harp playing. There'll be some type of something that will happen where you'll realize, oh, that's how that works. And it will suddenly become a lot more apparent. But some people just can't get it. And they will spend a lot of time on subnetting. If that's you, and you've spent just a large amount of time, much more than any of these other topics on subnetting, I would kind of recommend you consider the time you're spending on that, because there are other things you probably could be learning that would most likely show up on your exam. Since this is just 2 bullets of a single subdomain that is part of a much larger domain, that is part of 5 different domains, it's possible on your exam you might not get any subnetting questions. People have reported back to me and said, I spent forever trying to study subnetting and I never got it, but as it turns out, I didn't get any questions about it. Or maybe they got 1 question. Maybe they got 2. I mean, we have to deal with the random number generator here. So this is really where I recommend you use the right time with studying in the best possible way. So that's probably the thing that I hear about most is I can't subnet. I'm never going to be able to subnet. Math is difficult for me. And uncharacteristically, I'm going to tell you, yeah, just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If it's that big of a problem for you, for the purposes of this exam, maybe you should table that. Go study everything else. And if you have time, come back to it. I will tell you, though, if you're interested in getting into networking, you do need to know how to subnet. If you're planning to do other networking certifications, you'll absolutely need to know how to subnet. But I will tell you, most importantly, that it's going to be really, really, really important for you to know subnetting as part of your networking career. You will use it every day. You will use it as a sanity check, a troubleshooting tool. You'll use it for planning. And if you're planning to take any other advanced troubleshooting or networking certifications, that would be so useful to you. You will find that you're using it all the time. For the purposes of Network Plus, don't worry. Don't put such a huge emphasis on one single topic. And that really applies across the board. Maybe you get stuck on port numbers. Well, learn as much as you can about those port numbers, but keep in mind how much time you could possibly spend on any particular topic. You have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of topics you need to know for your exam, so make sure you are familiar with all of them. They're going to be super important as you go through your studies. Okay, let's keep going through the other questions that you have listed here. So let's see what other things you might have available. A lot of questions about exams themselves. So let's talk about the exam process and what I like for the exam process and what makes sense for me, and maybe it makes sense for you too, or maybe it doesn't. This is a question that came in from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, do you prefer to take the CompTIA test at home or at a testing center? Oh, you've just opened up a powder keg of comments and questions and thoughts and ideas. There are two ways that you can take your CompTIA exams these days. You could go to an exam center. This is usually a testing center that has probably a set of classes that they do. And as part of what they offer at that testing center, at that learning center, that training facility, they will usually have a separate room set aside for taking exams. And CompTIA exams would be one of those that they will support at that particular location. You don't have to take a class there to be able to gain access to that testing. That is something that's available and they offer as part of their services. So you would go to the CompTIA website. You would say that I want to take my exam at a testing center, and it presents you with a number of testing centers that are nearby to your location. And then you can choose which one you want. You can choose the day you want, and you just have to make sure that you will travel to that testing center and take your exam. There's some nice advantages to doing this that way. One of them is that you don't have to set up the testing environment. You simply show up. You've got your IDs. You need 2 IDs for the exam. The ID policy is listed on the CompTIA website. They don't have to be photo IDs for both of them. One of them does. But you need those 2 IDs. Just walk in. That's it. You don't need to do anything else other than show up and be ready to take the exam. They will provide you with everything else. They will provide you with the computer. They will put you in a room. It's a quiet environment. They will give you something to write on. They'll give you usually an erasable marker that you will use to write on this laminated page. And then you start your exam. That's it. Very easy to make that happen. What you have to do, of course, is get there. And depending on where you live, that could be easy. It could be difficult. There might be parking challenges. I really recommend, if you're going to take an exam in a testing center, do a run-by of the testing center. And if you have a chance to stick your head in the door and ask to see the testing room, they're usually very accommodating. They'll let you come in, either look through the window or look in the door. This is what the testing room looks like. So you can be comfortable that it's an environment that would work for you. If it's cramped and you're not comfortable with the environment, it's not, they don't have air conditioning or something like that, that scenario can be a bit of a challenge. But this gives you a chance to either allow or not allow testing at that location. Maybe you want to use a different location. Maybe you want to pick somewhere else to go. So you've got options. And a testing center really is one that is the easiest to go through the testing process. The challenge is just getting there on time and making sure you're able to take the exam. Not everybody has the luxury of having a testing center near them, however. So another option you might want to consider, the other option that CompTIA provides, is being able to take the test online. This is a bit of a challenge from CompTIA's perspective, of course, because they want to give you the ability to take the exam at home, but they need to make sure that your home environment is just as secure as an actual testing center. So there are a lot more rules and a lot more requirements to be able to take your exam at home, but they give you the entire list of things that you need to think about. There's certain rules. For example, if you were to look at my studio, I got a lot of screens here. It takes a lot to do a live stream, apparently. So, okay, maybe it's a little over-engineered, but this is what we use when we're doing a live stream here. Very useful and very important to have that available. But if I was to take a CompTIA exam, one of their rules is there can only be one screen. That's it. You don't get more than one screen when you're taking these exams. So because of that, my studio would not work as a very good testing environment. But this is where I usually am. So they really want to be sure that if you do have additional screens, you have to unplug them. Some people will put, they'll unplug them, remove power, and then cover them with a sheet, cover them with a towel. so that there's no possible way they could be used for anything. They do take pictures of your environment prior to the exam starting. And while you are in the exam, someone is watching you over your camera. They're analyzing and watching you to be able to see what's going on. So you have to look through their rules. You have to be able to follow their rules during the exam. You can't get up and leave. You can't talk to yourself. Then again, you really can't talk to yourself in a testing center either. I don't know, a lot of people get wrapped up around that particular problem, but can't do that in a room full of people either. It's not allowed. You can't have things to write with on your desk. You can't do anything. There can't be anything near you. I think they do allow you to have a drink in a glass, something they can see. But they're very particular. You can't cover your mouth during the exam. You can't sit there and go, I wonder what the answer to this question is, because you could be talking into a recording device. And so they don't want that to happen either. This has to be secure. It has to be in the up and up. We have to make sure that that environment is just as secure as an actual testing center. So they're a little bit strict when it comes to taking your exam online. But if you stay here, it's quiet. You don't have people going, you can't have people going in and out. If somebody walks behind you, your test is over. If you walk up, get up from your chair to answer the door during the exam, your test is over. If you cover your mouth and you don't remove your hand after they've told you to not cover your mouth, your test is over. So there are things when at home makes the environment much easier because you don't have to travel anywhere, but it's also a little bit stricter than being in an actual exam center, in my experience. I guess there could be some exam centers out there that are really, really strict, but most of the time, I think an exam center is a little more relaxed. They aren't quite as strict with the rules because it is their environment. They know their environment is already secure. They don't have to worry that there's some type of recording option to be able to do that. So something you could consider when you're planning to take your exams. I think if you're someone who's working through the idea of taking an exam at home, great way to do it. You just have to be aware that sometimes you could run into problems with that because it's not always something specific that you're thinking about. You may not be thinking about covering your mouth, but you can't do it. So make sure you read through the rules and that you are very clear and you are very aware of what those rules are so that you do not run into any problems if you take your exam at home. For that reason, I guess the question was, what would I do? And I like going to a testing center because I don't like the variables that are in my home for this. But I have a lot of testing centers that are local to me, so I don't have to worry about that so much. If I didn't, yeah, I'd take my exam at home. Sure, of course, no problem. But I just have to make sure I understand those rules going into it. I really recommend you read through those. You might be surprised at what some of those rules say and what you may want to think about your environment and what you have. And if it really fits, you might want to consider or reconsider where you are taking your exam. If you're in a testing center, you are usually in a room with other people who are also taking their exams. So another thing to consider that I like to put in earplugs when I'm in a testing center because the people coming in and out, that makes noise and I'm trying to study and focus on my exam. So find the one that works best for you. Both are really good. You just have to understand the advantages and disadvantages of both. Let's keep going through this list of questions that you have here for the different options that you have listed. A lot of great questions coming in, by the way. A lot of good things that you need to know. I think if we are going through technologies and understanding the exams themselves, there are a lot of important things you need to know for the exam. We've talked about the exam objectives. This is why I'm constantly saying during the live stream, have you downloaded the exam objectives? Have you read through the exam objectives? Have you used them as a checklist? Is a great way to test yourself to be able to see if you really are ready to take the exam. A lot of the answers I have for you are get the exam objectives. They tell you everything you need to know. It's like a secret that has everything in it. It's a game changer. And I tell you this over and over because I do have people that come into my Discord and they'll say, I just took my Network Plus exam. I didn't pass it. And they were asking me about things I was not expecting. Well, oh, really? What did they ask you about? They asked me about 802.1q trunking. Like, well, yeah, that's listed in the exam objectives. And they say, what are the exam objectives? So not having those objectives can be very, very bad for you. Make sure you get the objectives. They are so important. That's why I say it over and over and over again. I fear sometimes I say it too much, but I say it too much just so you're aware just how important they really, really are. Next on our list, let's go through a few more questions that you have. I keep losing my earpiece today. I need to work on getting a new connection there for that earpiece. I don't know what I'm listening to. It's really just me, but there we are. Let's see what other questions you have. I think we've answered a lot of the questions about what things are important on the exam, what things would you expect to find on the exam. It's all the exam objectives. Let's talk about jobs in this industry, specifically around the networking side of things. James asks, what skill set and certifications does a person need to become or qualify for that for a job as a network engineer? As a former network engineer, I can certainly speak to this one. When we start talking about skill sets in this industry, it's important that we consider what foundational knowledge is important for the different jobs you might run into. When we talk about A+, for those of you that have watched our A+ study groups, or perhaps you've even taken the A+ certification exams, you know that that exam focuses on entry-level knowledge into the world of IT. And for the most part, if you're planning to get a job in IT, it would be useful if you knew about operating systems. It would be useful if you knew about the hardware that was inside of a computer. It would be useful if you had some basic networking knowledge. It would be useful if you had some basic security knowledge. And it would be useful if you knew how to troubleshoot some of these technologies. That's really what the A+ focuses on. Those skills apply to the all of IT. So whether you're going into databases, data centers, cloud-based technologies, for some reason you've decided to do something with AI, maybe you are in networking or security, maybe you're working as a PC technician, those skills in the A+ are used across the entire grouping of any IT career. So A+, a great place to start, and it's foundational. I talk a lot about the foundational knowledge. James is asking specifically about skill sets and certifications to be a network engineer. For networking, now we're getting into the infrastructure. Now we're building that road of technology. We're setting up switches. We're configuring routers. We're connecting VPNs. We're trunking connections together. We are working with routing tables. We're troubleshooting all of those things. We're making sure that we have communication from one side of the network to the other. These are a set of complex skills. You could be a network engineer and be growing and learning for your entire career if that was all you were doing was network engineering. And eventually network engineering leads itself into network design, network troubleshooting. There's a lot more associated with that. But for network engineering, you need that basic of foundational knowledge. And for networking, I think a good start to that foundation is in Network Plus. So learning about what protocols are, how they work, what they look like. What is that OSI model? How do we think about the flow of traffic across the network? What type of cabling or fiber do we use to connect these devices together? What are those weird interfaces that we're plugging and unplugging? Oh, an SFP? What is that? So these types of fundamental technologies all together help you start the process of learning what you need to be a network engineer. And I think a lot of organizations usually have different tiers of networking professionals. They might have an entry level or a junior network engineer. You might have a network engineering role, and there might be a senior network engineer. And I think that for the most part, you will probably see many network engineers have their Network Plus, and or they will have higher level certifications with network engineering specifically. I think one very common and extremely popular certification is the Cisco Certified Network Engineer. So or Network Administrator, Cisco Certified Network Administrator, CCNA. That is probably the one that most people will focus on for getting some type of networking knowledge. I mentioned earlier that on Network Plus that subnetting is an important part of the foundation of everything else you do, but it's a small part of the Network Plus exam. When you're ready to take your CCNA, that's a huge part of the exam. So a lot of the questions on your Cisco exam will be subnetting questions. If you've watched my Network Plus course, you've probably seen my video on 7-second subnetting. That is the process I used when I took my Cisco exams, because when I'm in the middle of an exam, I am not able to think. The anxiety of taking an exam can be crippling at times for me, and I can never trust when I'm doing math that I'm doing math properly. I'm so worried about getting the exam done in time. I'm worried about knowing the content. I'm having to parse out all of these subnetting questions. I just need a way to be able to do subnetting without doing any math, or doing as little math as possible. If I have to add one or subtract one, I can do that. But don't ask me to start trying to figure out the powers of 2. It's hard for me to remember those. It's just one of those things I have when I'm taking an exam. Now, if I'm not taking an exam, for some reason, I can do subnetting fine in my head. I've been doing this for years in the industry, and a lot of the different subnets I've just got memorized at this point. I can do a /26 for you in an instant. I've got it because I used to manage a /26 network. Obviously, /16, /24s are very easy to do in your head. But there's differences when you get into other subnets and doing the translation between the decimal and the CIDR notation. Sometimes I'll mess it up. And in the heat of an exam, it's very easy for me to mess those up. So that's why I created, or sort of evolved out of a lot of different shortcuts, created my own style of shortcut that is a minimal amount of math. And I've had people leave comments on that video for 7-second subnetting saying, do you have a problem? Can you not just calculate things? Well, the answer is yes, I do. So that's why I created it. Everybody has a different way of approaching subnetting. I'm not saying the 7-second subnetting is right for you. I'm saying it was right for me. But that's why I also have the other subnetting types on these videos for my Network Plus course. So we also have the different shortcuts, different ideas. You could do it manually. You could use 7-second subnetting. And I use different formats available in different videos so that you can find the shortcut that works for you. I think most people sort of take a little bit from one shortcut type, they take a little bit from another shortcut type, and they sort of blend them together to create their own anyway. I would highly recommend you find a format that works for you too. But if it's me, subnetting is an important part of the things you will need to know. So those foundations become very important. Being able to set up a switch from somebody hands you a new switch, says, configure this for our network. Okay, well, I guess I need to do that. That is obviously outside the scope of the Network Plus exam, but it's absolutely in scope for the CCNA. Same thing for routers. I need to configure a router. Well, how do I configure these interfaces on a router? What IP addresses do I associate with these interfaces? What subnet masks do I put on those interfaces? How do I do that? And then how do I configure the routing tables between all of these different routing interfaces? Those are important skills to know. The useful part of this, by the way, is once you know how to do it for one type of router, it's basically the same for every other router out there. Because routing is a technology that's not specific to a manufacturer. Routing is what we use on routers, regardless who makes that particular router. So as soon as you understand the fundamentals of a routing table, those fundamentals apply to Layer 3 firewalls, to other manufacturers' routers, to the routing functionality that you can start up on a Linux machine. It's all the same. Knowing those fundamentals of switching, of routing, and of switching and routing technologies can take you a very long way in the world of networking. And of course, it adds to your foundation that you will then continue to build on. And as I mentioned before, the things that you will learn with networking, you will continue to learn more networking skills throughout your career, and you will never know everything. For example, just take OSPF, a very common, very well-used, very popular dynamic routing protocol used across thousands and thousands of organizations. But if you were to look at the specification for OSPF, it is enormous. And I would tell you that I know a fraction of OSPF, and I've managed OSPF networks, but you only have to know a fraction of it because you rarely get into the detailed weeds and very complex configuration options you will find with OSPF. Or you might be joining a very large organization where you're using some of these more advanced functions of these routing protocols. So you might find that you're still learning as you go throughout your career, but you will never know everything. I think this is something that people often are confused about because they think, okay, I've learned Network Plus, all done. Networking is finished. I no longer have to learn anything else about networking. Doesn't work that way. New networking technologies are coming down the line all the time. New connections, new protocols, new technologies, and being able to optimize the traffic across those technologies. There's never a point in your IT career where you will stop learning. You will always be learning. You will always be trying to figure out how to do something new or more advanced, or a feature of a set of protocols that you never used before. Well, now you need to use those features. So now you need to learn those. It's something that I think a lot of people don't realize in the world of technology. Just in my career, I've had to learn new technologies that have also now sort of died off. And now we don't even use them at all. And take, for example, ATM, not the automatic teller machine, the very complex and well implemented and well deployed asynchronous transfer mode networking topology and protocol. Something that was incredibly popular 20 years ago. Now, we really don't do ATM connected devices anymore. We still use some of the functionality of ATM and maybe some of the protocols that were associated with ATM, but it is nothing today on our networks that we used to have in those ATM days. So that's a really good example of a technology we all had to learn. We all had to really get familiar with it, and then suddenly it disappeared, and we just went to gigabit Ethernet. We skipped over everything and we stuck with Ethernet, which also is an important corollary to that story, which is there are some technologies you will learn today that you will use for the rest of your career, for the rest of your life. And Ethernet's a really good example of one of those. The Ethernet that I learned back when I started my career is the same Ethernet I'm using today. So make sure you keep that in mind, is that you may think, why am I going through learning all these port numbers? Why am I going through the process of learning this subnetting? Why are we doing all of this? This seems relatively pointless, but in reality, it's not pointless at all. You'll be using those technologies for the rest of your career, and you'll be glad that you know them. In fact, you'll start to realize that if you're able to subnet in your head, you're actually well beyond what many network administrators can do today. So you'll find very quickly that, yeah, if somebody gives you a IP address and a subnet mask and a default gateway, and you look at it and realize, no, wait, your default gateway is not on the same subnet as the IP address you gave me. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, here's the correct default gateway. So you're able to do some nice sanity checks just because you're able to subnet quickly in your head. It becomes extremely useful to do that. And it's nice when you meet another network engineer who's able to do that as well. Things just go so much easier. I cannot tell you how many times I've been on the phone with a support person telling them these IP addresses aren't right. In fact, I had that circumstance when I first got a cable modem installed when it was a very early technology. And I got one of the very first cable modems installed, and it wouldn't work. They plugged it in, they connected me, and it wasn't working. And I looked at the configuration they gave me, and indeed, the IP address that I was being assigned was on a different subnet than the default gateway that I was assigned. So I call into first level tech, and I told them, this isn't working, but I see that you gave me this IP address, and it gave me this default gateway. They're on different subnets. And they said, well, thank you for calling. Let's reboot your router. No, hold on. Hold on. I know your checklist says, let's reboot this router. It's not going to work after I reboot it because your IP address and your default gateway are in a different subnet. Yes, I understand that, but we need to reboot your router. Have you rebooted your router yet? I'll hold while you reboot your router. Okay, here we go. Okay, I've rebooted the router. Okay, what happened? It doesn't work because the IP address you gave me is different. These are the things you go through in this scenario. So when you're able to find somebody who understands that, it's amazing how much easier things go. ultimately, we did get that straightened out. They put me on the right VLAN. They gave me the correct IP addresses. They gave me the correct default gateway, because at the time, you had to manually configure all of those things. These days, you just plug it in and it all works. You know why they did it that way? Because of what I had to go through. That's why. Not because of me, because they were getting a lot of phone calls. They didn't want to get all those calls of people having problems. But knowing that and being able to tell someone else, and then finally having someone understand what you're saying, that's where you're working with somebody and makes the process so much easier. Knowing those things can be incredibly, incredibly useful. Let's keep going through the questions that you have submitted. We have a little bit of time left, so I would like to go through some of these and working through them. Let's see what other things you might be asking. A lot of good questions on here. A lot of people on talking about subnetting still. Some people say I use the magic number subnetting. Some people say I use 7-second subnetting. I don't care which one you use. Use the one that works for you. This is not something we argue about. We can have the argument about Mac versus Windows. Let's all fight about what's right and what's wrong with those. I think that's a somewhat pointless argument, but it is an interesting one nonetheless. But there's no argument about how you subnet. Ultimately, you all get to the same answer, regardless of what subnet method you use. Find the combination that works for you. That's what I did with my 7-second subnetting. Maybe mine's too simple for you. Maybe mine is too many charts to have to use. I totally understand that. Now break it down into something that works easier for you. Maybe you're much better at powers of 2 than I am. Well, I can tell you, you are much better at powers of 2 than I am. So I know that if you can do that, that works just fine. Let's keep going through with all of the questions that you have, other types of things. Let's talk about this one. This is an interesting one. Speaking of designing networks, Drennan asks, would you recommend any particular software-based firewall for home network? We generally think of the firewall on our home network as being a box, as being a physical device. And I think most people will do that. They'll have a physical device that they use, usually made by a home router / access point company. So it would be a Netgear. It would be a D-Link. It's difficult sometimes to find one that you like with all the features. There's, of course, different options for interfaces and speeds, and you find the piece of hardware that supports what you do. But I like the idea of software-based firewalls, and in some cases, even having a software-based firewall that runs on that hardware. So this is... let me give you an example of a couple of those. I'm trying to talk and type at the same time, and I am incapable of doing any of those things. I ran into this most recently because I was setting up a Netgear firewall for something else, and I was trying to connect together multiple subnets. In fact, it was a subnet, had a router on the other side of the subnet. So I really had 2 routers, but these home routers, these home firewalls can't route to multiple subnets. They route to one subnet, and it wasn't working at all. So I ran into that real quick. This is a real challenge. There's a lot of great open source firewalls out there. In fact, the chat room even came up with the one that I commonly will reference, which is OpenSense. This is a firewall that is software-based. You can run it on a lot of existing hardware or run it on your own hardware. It has tons of features available in it, including things like hardware failover. It's got great monitoring and reporting. You don't get that from your Netgear. And it's got intrusion prevention built into it. You can do some interesting reports on that. And they even give you the option to add some more powerful intrusion prevention on those. It's open source. It's downloadable. You can use it on your own machine. And I often tell you, if you're planning to get into networking, it's always good if you have some type of home lab that you've set up. Here's a great home lab. Whether you use this as your own firewall, as your primary firewall for your home, or whether you're using it as a lab firewall, which you can also set up too. Maybe you're NATing through the firewall out to your normal network, which is then going out your normal firewall. Both of those are great use cases. So this is not the only choice for open source firewalls or for freely available firewalls on there, but it can be extremely useful to load it up and try it and become more familiar with the terms, with the process, because just like I mentioned with networking and with switches and with routing tables and with setting up a router, setting up a firewall has similar technologies across all the firewalls. So the things you do in OpenSense and the rules that you set up will also position you well for setting up a Palo Alto Networks firewall, a Checkpoint firewall, a Fortinet firewall. All of those are very similar in their function, in their foundation. But of course, the screens will be a little bit different between all of them. Some of the terms may be different between all of them, but the foundational technologies are exactly the same between all of them. In fact, I haven't run the latest version of OpenSense. I haven't run it in a while. That'd be something fun to do in my lab as well. Might be something you might want to consider doing as well on your network. Let's see what other questions have come up in this view. Got more that have come in. Thank you for sending these questions in. I know we're sort of getting close to the top of the hour, so I want to squeeze a couple more in and being able to bring this through. There are other challenges in here. Now, this is one I think I spoke a little bit about this in that last question we have. This is a question that asks, I have the A+ certification, but I'm having trouble finding employment. How do I get experience when no one is hiring me with that experience? It is the ultimate catch-22 when it comes to getting hired, isn't it? That's such a common thing. They're asking for that, but they aren't giving me the chance to have any of that. So therefore, how do you even create that? Experience is probably the number one that I hear when it comes to something like that. There are a number of things you can do to best position yourself in what today would be considered a very challenging hiring environment. This is not the best economy to try to find a lot of technical jobs. Earlier last year, sort of about a year ago, we saw a lot of layoffs occurring. There was this big push about AI, and everybody said AI is going to take over these jobs. We don't need these people anymore. We're going to lay off all these jobs, and we won't have to hire these A+ and Network Plus people anymore. What amazing things would be for these companies. Now, we're seeing an enormous reverse on all of that. They've now fired all their AI people and they're hiring normal people back again because, as it turns out, this idea that an untrusted and untested technology would be replacing humans turns out doesn't work that way. So they've started hiring people again. So we're starting to see a little bit of flexibility, a little more additional hiring going on in the industry, and maybe we'll start to see more of that pick up as we go along. There's, of course, a lot of crazy things going on in the world. There's a lot of different things pulling at different areas of the hiring process, but there are some things you can do to best position yourself regardless of what the hiring environment might be. And if you look in the YouTube video description of this video, I have a video I made of how to get a job in IT with no experience, which really speaks to the question that's asked here. To give you a summary of that video, it's a long video. It's 30 minutes long. In my world of videos, that's a long video, but it is chock full of information. There's not a lot of lagging or talking of other things or going down a different road. We stick to the topic at hand, and we try to fit in as much information as possible in that 30-minute time frame. But there are 4 elements that I tell you are the most important to have when you are planning to get a job in IT with no experience. One of them is the thing we've done today. So it's in industry certification. Employers love industry certifications, not only because it shows that you have a basic knowledge of the things that were covered on that exam, it also shows that you are willing to go out and get that certification, which doesn't happen automatically or by magic. You have to apply yourself. You have to study. Sometimes this takes months of your life. You could have 3 to 6 months that you've been studying for this exam to finally earn that certification, and employers know this. So that is a nice check to have on your resume that you have an A+ certification, you have a Network Plus certification, or you have whatever certification that the employer is specifically asking about. That's another important consideration, is that make sure you look to see what the employer would like you to have. Depending on where you are in the world or depending on where you are in the country, you may find that a lot of the jobs want Security Plus, Or you may find a lot of the jobs want A+, but you'll never know unless you look at the job postings and you start doing your own research. And I do talk about that in the video as well. And I give you some ideas on how you can perform that research. The second of those domains is that you have some formal degree. This could be a technical degree. It could be a computer science degree. I guess if you found one of these rare four-year organizations that has an IT degree, it could be that as well, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be a business degree. That's the degree I have. I have a business management degree from Florida State University. It's not a technical degree. It doesn't have anything to do with computer science, but it is a four-year degree. And it's not an easy degree to get. No degree really is super easy to get. Well, maybe some are. But something other than a liberal arts degree really works very well when you're trying to present yourself as someone who's trying to get into the world of IT. So a degree in engineering, in chemistry, in economics, in business, those are good degrees to have. So something to consider. That four-year degree shows that you were able to apply yourself. You were able to stick with this for 4 years. In my case, 5 years. Took me a little while to get through it, but I got through it. I got my degree. And you were able to earn that. And that's something you can show as something that is a significant credential to go on your resume. And as again, it doesn't have to necessarily directly apply back to the job that you're looking at, but sometimes that can help depending on the company that you're talking to. The third element is one that probably is talked about in this question about how do you get experience if you have no experience? And the answer to that's not an easy one, because it is difficult to get a job with a company if they require or demand that you have some type of experience. So you have to make your own. And in my video, I do describe a couple of different ways to do that. One is to volunteer yourself to provide IT services for maybe organizations that you're already a part of. If you have a church or a school or some type of place of worship that you attend, maybe they have a lot of computers that need to make sure that their antivirus is always updated. Maybe they need to have backups done. Maybe you need to manage that process or help them with making sure that their data is safe. What will happen if they lose that computer that they use in the main office? Their whole system may be down. They might even lose data. Are their backups occurring properly? Do they even have a backup policy? Do they have a set of procedures? So that's maybe something that can really help. And of course, that's something you can put on a resume. The other thing to think about, if you're not going to a third party, a place of worship, a charity, or you're doing this in an internship type scenario, you might want to make your own experience. We talked about that earlier by installing open source firewalls. That's a really good one to do if you're looking at getting into the world of networking, because you're able to use this as a story. And that's what you're trying to do, is come up with stories that you can use during an interview. We often think of interviews as being someone grilling you to see if you know information. Here's a technical question. You have to answer the technical question. And indeed, some interviews are like that. But a lot of your initial interviews are going to be about, tell me about the things you've done in this industry. Tell me about a problem that you ran into that you had to solve. They're simply throwing out an opening line. They're throwing out an icebreaker, and they want you to now talk for 10 minutes. So you have to have a story to talk about. And I think installing a software-based firewall, an open source firewall on your network, there's all kinds of stories you can get from this. Think about this. Let's say I'm coming in to interview with you for a networking position, and they say, tell me about a problem you ran into and how you solved it. Well, I just installed the latest version of OpenSense. Have you guys used OpenSense? Have you seen that? It's an open source firewall. It's amazing. It has built into it layer 3 routing. It's got IPS functionality. You can set up a number of different rules in the rule base. It has IPsec networking, so you can connect different locations site to site. So already you're sort of spilling these technical terms out so you can let them know that you know these terms, that you know what you're talking about. And they said, and I set it up on my network, and I crashed everything. And here's why. And maybe you did. Maybe you set it up, and during the process of setting it up, suddenly things didn't work right anymore. And you realized, oh, wait, I checked and I had set up my new firewall with the same IP address as my old firewall, and everything started going crazy. Had to do some packet captures, found the problem, changed the IP address, and everything worked normally. I don't recommend doing that on a production network. That was in my lab at home, and that's why we do it in a lab before we put it into a production scenario. So you can also talk about, then I plugged it into my internet. I used it as my primary internet firewall, and I created a rule to log every time somebody tried to send in some malicious code into my firewall by turning on the IPS functionality and having it do reporting. And I created a report for the first hour of me connecting this device to the internet. Take a guess at how many malicious attacks I saw from different IP addresses during the first hour. Do you care to take a guess? This is just a fun conversation you get to have. Closest to the pin, everybody in here. How many do you think? 100? You say 500? You said 1,000? Here's a report I generated from my firewall showing 20,000 attacks during the first hour and what those attacks were and how my firewall blocked them. That is a compelling story. That's a really good story. If somebody showed up in an interview with me showing me all of this information, they're going pretty high on my list of people to consider for this position. None of this is a foolproof scenario. None of it is a you did this and therefore you must be all things knowing about networking, but it's a story that you get to tell. It sort of has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end, like all good stories do. And you have a report. Let me tell you, hiring managers in general, they love reports. They love them. A report, it's like gold. They wish they had more in their current environment. Why can't we have more reports? They just love reports. So you showing them reports and being able to, yeah, you can keep that report. And you, of course, have your name and your contact information on the report and how it was generated. Maybe you created a report that just includes the ones that were there from the firewall, and you talk about how it was created. And this report was created based on, maybe you've got a cover page to it, and you hand them, and they keep that report so that when you walk out, they don't have to forget who you were. They can go, oh yeah, the guy that gave us this report, let's call him back. Let's call her back. Let's get them back in here and see if we can learn more about what they want to do. That's the type of thing that can sort of bridge the gap of that experience gap. The one where you're trying to get that entry-level position, but for some reason they want more than an entry-level person in an entry-level position. These are dichotomies and differences that are a natural part of the interviewing process. You can't get away from it, but there are things you can do to help with it. I said there were 4 elements, right? I said there was your industry certifications, your formal education, your home lab, and the things that you've done. And I give you a couple of different things you could do for a home lab in that video, so you might want to consider looking at that. The last one, and the one that may be most missed by all of the people when I used to do interviews, when I was the hiring manager myself, the one thing that people would very often miss is they knew someone who already worked there. Now you would think that offhand, initially, well, that doesn't sound right. That sounds very, I know they're not family, but it's almost like nepotism. Like you're taking advantage of a relationship with somebody to get a job. Yes. It's not really taking advantage. It's that you have an existing relationship, a professional relationship with people who already work in the organization. All right. Well, that does tend to ask the question of, how do you know someone who works there already? How would you get that information? Well, that does take a little bit of work because you sitting at home or going through your classes, you don't normally interact with those folks. How could you get into an environment where you can meet and interact with people that are already working at these big companies? And the way that we do it in our industry is we attend meetings and trade shows. You meet tons of people in this industry by going to a Microsoft user group meeting, by going to a Cisco user group meeting, by going to a Palo Alto Networks user group meeting. The people that work in those big companies, they're going to those meetings. And I know because I used to set up those meetings. When I worked at Network General, we would have Sniffer user group meetings. When I worked at Palo Alto Networks, we would have Palo Alto Networks user group meetings. I was tasked with most of the time doing the presentation for those meetings and talking about some of the latest technologies and the way that you would see them on people's networks. And of course, talk about the stories that I had about plugging into people's networks and the things that we saw. No names, of course, but we talk about the challenges that people had in their current environments. Now, if you're working at one of these big companies, that's important and useful information. So they would show up, plus there's free food, there's free drinks, you can hang out, and there's always a chance to meet people when you're at these. There's time set aside for chatting. And you have a name tag, and you go, hi, I'm this person, I'm that person. Oh, you're working with that company. I've seen your buildings. I've driven by your buildings all the time. In fact, I was looking at a job that was an entry-level position at your company. And maybe it would be a good time to ask, what do you think I should have on my resume? What things does your organization really look at for entry level? At that point, one of the things that very often happens is they will ask you for your resume. And the reason they do that is a lot of these very large companies and even small companies these days have their own employee referral program. These referral programs sort of circumvent the third-party recruiter market and effectively turn their own employees into recruiters. And you can bring people in. The reason they're asking for a resume is they're going to take your resume, they're going to hand that off to HR and sort of register your name with them in their HR department. So if they end up calling you in for an interview and then they hire you, you get a job, and the person that recommended you gets a little bit of a bonus. They get a few $100 for being a referral, and you know them. And that's the most important part of this. We don't like to hire people off that we don't know, they walked in the door. There's no reference as to who they are. It's hard to really get it's almost impossible to get a complete view of anyone in an interview. They're already putting on a face. We tend to do that in interviews. It's hard to know what they really think about certain things. It's hard to know how they really operate day to day. And we don't know if they're trying to get a new job because they're just not doing well at the job that they're in. Maybe they were fired from their last position, or maybe they're a fantastic employee, but we don't know when we are sitting there in that initial interview. But if they know someone who works here, there's a connection. And immediately you think, okay, you're not just a nobody off the street who doesn't know this stuff and you're just faking it as you go. You really are somebody who's interacted with the folks that work here. So there's at least some relationship there that we can start relying on. And maybe you've met them over time. Maybe you're on their LinkedIn. Maybe you've talked often at these user group meetings. Maybe they've given you recommendations on things you can do to make the interview process even better. Maybe they even mentioned about different projects that they're doing that you might want to bring up during the interview. These are all very useful things. So it is a two-way street. It's not just you using someone's name or someone's position to get a job. You already have created some type of, I wouldn't say a reputation with them, but I would say there is a knowledge of each other. There's a professional knowledge that you can use to be able to say, no, we know them. They seem to be normal at the user group meetings. We've talked all about technologies. They know about our projects. So there is a familiarity there. And I think that's the important part of that. That goes a long way. And that's the fourth element when you're talking about the four things you could possibly bring in. Not all of this is about experience. Some of it is about the stories that you have. Some of it is about the way you carry yourself. Sometimes it's about the way you dress. Every employer has a different set of criteria and a different weighting to that criteria that they like to use. And you're never quite sure exactly what works best. So, wear your lucky shirt. Make sure that your clothes don't have any holes in them. Make sure that you look professional. You don't have to wear a tie. You don't have to show up in formal wear, but you do have to be someone who presents themselves nicely, can have a conversation, can tell the stories that you need to tell. And if you're the one doing most of the talking during the interview, you're doing this right. Those are my recommendations for getting a job in this industry and maybe making it a little bit smoother when you're planning to get that interview. Of course, you got to do things before you get the interview. I do have another set of videos, and I think it's also in this YouTube video description, on 5 reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. I have a follow-up to that, which is 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. There are things you can do to better position yourself before they've even met you. And I talk about a lot of these, pretty much everything I could think of, I stuck into both of those videos, and things like a cover letter. And I think I hear people argue about cover letters all the time on how it's a waste of time or how it's most important. There's too many schools of thought on these types of things, and I give you my opinion on them, and I give you my idea on what I think the best cover letter would be. Some things you might want to consider if you're planning to up your resume game just a little bit. Just a little tweak every now and then can position you a little bit higher than everybody else who's fighting for these same positions. Well, I think that gives us a good place to stop for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us in that first hour of Q&A. We always have a good time when we're going through our Q&A for the month. And of course, we'll do another one of these next month. Make sure you check in to our calendar from time to time to know when our next event is going to be. And of course, you can find that on the main menu of the Professor Messer website, or simply go to professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone.